of these things aside, the best thing that craft breweries, particularly local craft breweries, have is still our story, right? Like the things that make us important are timeless and relatable and they're powerful, they're impactful, they're all of these things. And I think that the Guild does such a good job of like crafting that story and creating that message. But I think it starts with all of us kind of, to your point, looking internally and being like, what is it that we need? What makes us special? How do we tell our story? What are we bringing to all of this besides great quality beer that's going to bring new consumers into the category?
You are listening to the Capital Craft Podcast, brought to you by the San Diego Brewers Guild. I'm your host, Eric Fowler.
And my name is Jeff Fox with Beer Media Co.
And I am Jill Olesh with Pizza Port Brewing Company.
We are so excited to have you here today.
I am so excited to be here today, you guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you've been a big supporter of the Guild throughout your career.
Oh, yeah, it's in my DNA.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about your history with the Guild, your time served and volunteering for the Guild, and what you currently do in your professional role.
Yeah, so previous to being on the board of the Guild was always something that was really important at Pizza Port. Our co-founder and president, Gina, was on the board for many years. I think she was one of the founding members, So for us, the Guild was just, again, part of the fabric of what makes San Diego beer, San Diego beer. So we were always doing what we could to support, participating in Guild Fest, right? Those early day Guild Fests were the place to be. So we all fought each other about who could go pour at them. So when 2015 rolled around, I got a phone call, and it was from the vice president of the Guild at the time, Mike Sardina, and he was like, "Hey, what are your thoughts on joining the board next year?" And I hadn't really thought about it, and I was super honored that they had identified me as a potential candidate to be part of something so prestigious and something that we thought was so important. So fast forward, I end up coming on board as the vice president in 2016. Mike decided to move on to new opportunities about halfway through the year, moved to the East Coast, and I became the president in the summer of 2016. So a little bit of a whirlwind.
Yeah, talk about trial by fire.
Yeah, I think at the time I was also like the head of the Beer Week committee or something else, which was really massive. And our executive director at the time, Paige, everybody knows Paige. I mean, she's a powerhouse. So it was a wild time. Beer was growing double digits. I mean, that was those crazy years, right? Where just beer as a whole was growing between 15 and 20% year over year, which was bananas. So served as president for the remainder of 2016 and 2017, served as president emeritus for 2018, and then I termed out. So since then, always done whatever I could or we could as Pizza Port to help support. I'm the director of sales, so my life is largely focused on building a sales team and building our distributor relationships in the footprint that we sell beer. So guess what? Our team gets to talk about San Diego beer for a living, which is amazing, all throughout our footprint. So I will say that even our members of our sales team in Northern California and Arizona, Nevada, they do what they can to work with the local guilds in those regions as well, because we see the enormous value that guilds provide.
Yeah, so it is part of your strategy when it comes to ways to benefit your business and interact with local markets.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing.
I'm going to open a beer while we answer that.
I think that is a wise idea. Yeah, here's the thing, right? Like, beer is something that has been around since the dawn of agriculture, right? So, when you couldn't drink water because you were worried that it was bad, you drank beer, right? When you're happy, you drink beer. When you're sad, you drink beer. So it's just kind of one of those things where it's so important that beer and local beer maintains its position in the community. And there's nobody that does that like the local guilds. So our kind of overall viewpoint in the regions that we distribute beer outside of Southern California, outside of San Diego, is that we're just happy to be here, and we're here to help be part of the local community however we can. And a lot of that starts with the local breweries and what their efforts are to help, create that amazing local community for craft beer.
I think community is so important, especially even within an industry. And that's one of the things that I've found the most special about this industry compared to a lot of the other ones I do marketing for is there's so much collaboration and so much partnership and working together rather than competition.
Yeah, rising tide, right?
Exactly. And do you think that how would you say that the guild kind of contributes to that culture, you think?
Oh, I think that's kind of the mission, right? Like you're, providing awareness and education, but we're doing it together. And I think that, being a business owner, I am not a business owner, but, having the livelihood of business owners be such an important thing that I learned so much about during my time at the Guild. It's that idea that like we're not alone, right? Someone has gone through what you're going through. And if you can share your experience for better or for worse, and your experience is not always going to be exactly the blueprint for someone else's way to navigate a situation. But anything that you learn from it, you can learn from anybody you talk to about anything if you're curious enough, right? So being able to connect people that are going through things and let them know that they're not alone and that there is a way to solve it legally and economically and efficiently. All of those things, like I don't think that there's a better way to foster community and build something really strong.
Yeah, and something that, our guild, and I've worked with a lot of different guilds throughout the U.S., and every guild struggles different. And
of course,
their resources are different,
right?
And the market is different. The participating breweries are different and have different needs. But something that we really need to focus on next year, and we have over the last year, is letting our member breweries understand that this is their organization,
right?
And empowering them to feel ownership,
right?
Like we have limited resources and we're there for them and want to help them succeed in whatever way they need, but really empowering them to make the drastic choices on which direction we're going as an industry, I think is really important. And because of the challenges our industry's been facing over the last couple of years since COVID, we've seen a retraction of that, longevity of thinking. When I first got into craft beer, and I assume it's probably about the same time for you, it was all about like, let's hit this percentage mark of sold, whether it was volume or dollar sales. Let's get to 10%. And the BA was really pushing that. We all had this unified goal we were pushing towards.
Yeah.
And the city had specific goals too, but we were riding that wave, and that wave's not there anymore.
No.
It's up to us, and it's up to our member breweries to decide what wave and which direction we're pushing. And I think it's a hard conversation. I don't think we're going to get there right away, but I think every business should be asking, where should my business be, and where should San Diego beer be in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think that those are all really good points. And I think, it's a wild time for beer, right? Like when beer is down, the conversation changes from, craft beer needs to be up. No, beer needs to be up. Right? We now need to focus on bringing people into the category of beer, which is a wild thing to say out loud because, again, we're talking about a beverage that's been around since the dawn of agriculture. And beer's not going anywhere, but the way people drink it, the way people are drinking alcohol, period, beverage alcohol, and why they're drinking it, those occasions, all of those things are different because of the availability of things in the marketplace, right? And where consumers used to go to craft beer for creativity and innovation, and we're seeing that across so many different industries that all funnel into beverage alcohol.
Yeah.
And I think that the main focus of, all of these things aside, the best thing that craft breweries, particularly local craft breweries, have is still our story, right? Like the things that make us important are timeless and relatable and they're powerful, they're impactful, they're all of these things. And I think that the Guild does such a good job of like crafting that story and creating that message. But I think it starts with all of us kind of, to your point, looking internally and being like, what is it that we need? What makes us special? How do we tell our story? What are we bringing to all of this besides great quality beer that's going to bring new consumers into the category?
Yeah.
Right? That's the challenge, and there's no perfect answer to that, and it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
Right?
And how are we influxing new ideas and personalities into the conversation too? Because we get, we're all guilty of going to an event, and if I go to GABF and I see Jill, who
I was just gonna say, isn't it funny how this is probably the first beer we've shared in San Diego in a year, and we've probably had 5 beers together this year.
That is funny.
Yeah, and that's just how it works. But I see a habit of that connectiveness of us finding reassurance in the comfort of people we know and the ideas we know.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of reflection on, San Diego Beer Week's coming up, and hopefully this episode airs somewhat about then.
Yeah.
But we've done a lot as an organization to really push Beer Week to bring it back up, and it's going to take years. It's not like 1 year it's going to change to what it was in 2016.
No.
But
it'll never be what it was in 2016, right? Like that's the magic, right?
Yeah.
Everything is what it is in its point of time. There's a lot of like cyclical nature to all of this, but at the end of the day, it's not up to us to do what we did in 2016. It's up to us to do something new.
Totally.
Right.
But the question often gets asked, or the sly comments of, Beer Week was so much better back then. Well, what are you doing for Beer Week this year? I don't know, maybe nothing. Well, that sounds like a you problem.
Yeah. And what did you do in 2016?
I mean, I guess I don't want to say Beer Week was so easy back then. Beer Week was so exciting back then, right? And that kind of goes back to that innovation comment that I made earlier that, people, it was new, everything was new, it was exciting. They couldn't get enough craft beer, right? Mm-hmm. What else can we do to relate to people? What else can we do to get them excited? What else can we do to share our stories with them? It's definitely a challenge. And to your point, it's going to take a couple of years to build it all back. But I think what's important to recognize too is that, yes, this is an existential crisis for craft beer, but look around. This is an existential crisis for the world, right? Nothing is how it was in 2016. Yeah. There's a lot of reasons why. We won't go into them. But I think that, that the beer industry itself, the craft beer industry, has matured to a point where it's going to be fine. Like we'll still have, a 13% piece of the pie, but growing becomes more challenging and managing your risks, managing your expectations, all of that stuff. You can't just throw stuff at a wall anymore, right? And it's been a long time since we've been doing that. But the real thought about the, start with why mentality, like, why am I doing this? What do I really want to achieve? Who am I? Why? Yeah. Why is my business going to make a difference? Ultimately, what do we want to achieve?
Yeah. And at what point of going down that chain of logic does beer come into it, right? It used to be right at the top. Why? Because I make better beer than everybody,
right? And it
might be a couple steps down now,
right? Well, no, I mean, I think that's more important than ever too. Like it's quality is paramount, right? Because ultimately there is still a lot of choice out there. So the amount of choice, and there's that, in 2015, 2016, you could have a couple of beers that you were like, okay, maybe these still need a little bit of work from a brewery, and you would keep trying them because you had faith that they would figure it out. And I don't think anybody lost faith that people can figure it out. I think they get distracted because there's so much variety and so much availability. So, critically important is the quality component, like that margin of error, that like 10 seconds, that first sip, that first half pint that you have to capture someone. It's really challenging to get them come back for a second try versus 8 years ago when they were like, you know what, we'll try them again. Yeah. But you know what helps that? Your customer service, your, ethos, your branding, your all of these reasons why you do what you do.
Yeah. I guess the point I was trying to make is that the consumer assumes beer is at that top level now, whereas back then they didn't. Yeah. Right? Back then they knew it was a risk trying something new. Now when they pick up a pint of craft beer, they assume the standard is high and it has to be good. So I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, I agree.
I think, and it probably has to
this
do
is
with...
like girl brain, boy brain thing.
It probably has to do something with like so many of these brands that have been around for a long time and have figured it out now. You're competing against those if you're coming out, and
it's the figure it out component of it. I mean, whew.
Well, I think there is still some opportunity to kind of figure out some new things because it's one thing that I think is really exciting about the industry is how it does move around. Preferences change, like the new styles and some of those kinds of things. Like, I mean, maybe you can walk us through a little bit, but Pizza Port was one of the original breweries in San Diego that kind of started this whole, craft beer scene, establishing us as the capital of craft.
Thanks,
all that.
Thanks, Gina and Vince.
Isn't that great? And so how the industry has changed from, being very West Coast IPA to then, and then the different tastes changing and all that, and riding through those eras. Yeah,
I think what's interesting about the call out of West Coast IPA, like that was unlike beer that people had ever had before, right? And that was kind of like that lightning in a bottle moment. And then to get, a brewery like Stone Brewing, who was having trouble finding distribution, to be like, you know what, we're just going to start our own distributorship, and to get them to be the people that are now bringing IPA from a tap room to a bar. So now you have access to it, or bringing it to a grocery store or to a liquor store, like all of those kind of things, making it available for people so that they don't have to go seek it out. I think that's why one of the key reasons that West Coast IPA became what West Coast IPA became. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but I think that from a consumer standpoint, like the availability of it, that was huge. That said, I think when you look across the taproom lineups in San Diego, everybody's got a variety of beer. It's great. The idea is there's something for everybody, right? If you look at data, the velocity still, it dictates that like 58 cents of every dollar spent on craft beer, and this is like grocery store scan data, but 58 cents of every dollar spent on craft beer is still spent on IPA. And there's a lot of I could get on a soapbox about all of that, but we won't.
But fortunately, I would say the majority of breweries aren't selling at the scale and through the model that Pizza Port is. So you don't have to worry about that as much as you would when making those decisions.
And what we're so fortunate about is something that we feel really grateful for is that we have our pubs and that we have this beautiful space with these talented brewers that, they can flip through all of the old brew logs. And by that, I mean like envelopes with paper plates with recipes written on them and brew whatever they want from that. But they can also create new things. Every location has their own house IPA, but we have a hef that we get asked for all the time from Ocean Beach called Flying Hawaiian Hefeweizen, right? Even in Arizona, our Arizona reps are like, can we get a pallet of Flying Hawaiian kegs? And I'm like, what? That's amazing, And you are seeing people kind of come back to those more sessionable styles. I think we kind of do this with flavor preferences and all of that. So I think having the ability to have something for everybody on your tap list makes it more inclusive in the space, right? It opens it up to more people. But, I think from the taproom mentality side of things, it's being able to get through the beer in the tanks as quickly. You know what I mean? That profitability factor of like, how am I going to brew the perfect volume of beer for the velocity that I need to hit for how this style moves within my four walls, which is different in every four walls. So it's a pretty interesting, chicken or the egg type thing with that. But I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with like, there's a lot of opportunity out there for innovation. I don't know. I think it's exciting. I think we're being challenged in a way that 8 years ago we didn't even think about.
I agree.
And I think that when people are forced to find the best versions of themselves or create new things, that's when some of the magic happens, right? Like that is lightning in a bottle. So I'm really excited. I think the Guild is so critical at, like the tap into knowledge and stuff like that, and getting happy hours together and just getting people to get in a room and talk about the cool things that they've been doing, whether they're relevant to like technical aspects or, new nonprofits they're working with or whatever it may be, a trip you're going to because all of a sudden you're now interested in this civilization that you never really thought about. And, I just like Chicha just popped into my brain or something like that, I think that the world is wilder than ever, but it's also more, I use the word available again. There's just a lot out there.
Yeah, the world is stimulating, but we need to continue to have craft beer and what we do stimulating as well in the same sense, right? With those things, when you saying that, I remember when all those Dogfish Head beers were coming out. It was like you didn't always like them all, but you learned something new.
Oh
and
man,
it pushed you outside your comfort zone a little bit, and that's what craft beer really is.
That's exactly what it is, and it's honestly our responsibility to carry the torch, right, for beer, but absolutely for craft beer. Especially here in San Diego, especially because we have been leaders in it for so long and we will continue to be. There are great breweries in this county. Are you kidding me? How lucky are we?
So lucky.
I mean, it's insane. It is absolutely insane. So I get excited when we have, accounts or distributor friends visit from out of town. I'll be like, where are you staying? Because wherever I'm going to go meet them, I'm like, where can we go hang out?
They're everywhere. And it's crazy how much beer quality is improved.
Oh, great beer everywhere. Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah, it really is a big difference.
I also really like people remembering that beer is fun and that beer can be fun and that we can be whimsical and that, it doesn't all have to be serious, which I think is great.
Yeah.
That kind of ties to the innovation thing. It's like, you know, slushies and stuff like that.
You kind of have to have
fun.
You have to
It's
have
fun.
that youthful, childish, almost like imagination quality
Yeah.
or something. What can we do?
Yeah.
And
Limitless.
it needs to remain a place that, I use my mom as an example constantly, but I'm like, it's got to be a place that you can bring somebody like my mom, right?
Yeah.
And maybe she doesn't drink craft beer very often, but she'll find something she likes that'll push her outside of her comfort zone a little bit, but she'll leave better off than when she arrived.
Yeah.
And we need to realize we're not always catering to ourselves,
Yeah. That's tough.
We get really excited about something. But I think we've shot ourselves in the foot as an industry a couple times with trends like that, or being snooty about something like the slushies, for example. It's like, well, a lot of people are doing them successfully. And, to even make those, you have to learn about stabilization and how to freeze it. And it's like there's a different culinary aspect of that than just throwing a beer on a draft line, and that's good.
Yeah. There's so much to learn about all of it, and I think that Ted Lasso effect, right? Be curious, not judgmental. Like just think of the darts,
Yeah.
I am optimistic. I think that again, we have one of, if not the best beer culture in the country. And I think that we all have a great story to tell. And I'm excited to see what's going to usher us into this next generation. But it is our responsibility to take ownership of it and do everything we can to,
Yeah. So I feel Pizza Port does an amazing job using where you're from, San Diego, as a badge, of marketing. It might not, it's pretty big on there, but
there's just when we think we can't find another beach scene for a can, we're like, oh man, Domo, you crushed it.
But how do you think breweries can better use San Diego as a bragging tool in their marketing and messaging of who they are to help promote that as a badge of honor?
Well, I think there's a couple layers to that question, because it also relates to what product are you talking about? Where is it going, like geographically, and what channel are you selling it through, right? Because we struggle sometimes, even a beer like Swami's, right? When Swami's is on a shelf in Carson City, Nevada, people have no idea that Swami's is the surf spot, right? And even though it says it on the can, then you're counting on them to read the small print on the can to really understand what that means. So, I think that is forever the question of how do you bring people in and tell them your story and get them excited about it in a way where it resonates with them. And for us, the remote markets are interesting because now there's so much local beer, which is amazing and awesome. But what's to get them to be more enamored with San Diego beer than with their local beer? So that's something we think about a lot, because we are so proud. And like I said, our team is out there all the time telling the story of San Diego beer. I mean, their elevator pitch is pretty driven, and do you know about San Diego beer? And it's something that the badge of honor thing is spot on. So.
Yeah, that would be a really cool workshop where we've been toying with the idea and trying to do more round tables and getting people in a room or, around a bar and have these types of conversations. But it would be fun to plan a whole day and kind of go through the history of San Diego beer and use the second half of the day having a candid conversation on where it should go in terms of using it as a marketing tool.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Cool.
And I think that the Guild as a marketing tool for San Diego beer is a pretty great spot for it to be in.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like you made it through the gauntlet almost, right? Is like, if everyone here assumes, a certain level of quality and you're keeping up, it's like almost like California, it's like San Diego certified, Yeah. It's like, if you make it here, you can make it anywhere, right?
Yeah, cool. Well, we appreciate you taking time.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me.
Today and over the last decade plus to help contribute to the local scene.
I can't imagine not. It's just so important.
Yeah. If anybody's looking for more on yourself or Pizza Port, where should they look?
Our website, just www.pizzaport.com. Any of our social media handles, I think they're all at Pizza Port Brewing Co. And
where are the pubs at, or where can they find you?
Yeah,
a lot of them.
Yeah, we have, 6 pubs in San Diego County now. So starting south, we'll start south and work north. Imperial Beach, Ocean Beach, Solana Beach, Bressie Ranch, which is inland Carlsbad Village. And then the newest location is the Pizza Port Tasting Room in San Marcos. So that is just a tasting room right now, but we're working on getting a food element over there soon.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for listening to the Capital of Craft podcast. And if you want to follow us on any of the podcast channels, we're available, as well as YouTube for the video version. So subscribe to us there. And then you can also follow us at SD Brewers for Instagram and all the social medias. So hopefully we'll see you at the next one. Cheers.
Yay! Cheers.